Hey everyone, welcome back to Brian's Mysteries and Adventures on Trail. Hope everyone's having a good week so far. And today's case takes us halfway across the world. This case took place on the island of Cyprus. And today we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Bruce Diggle. And to understand this case, I wanted to give you a little bit more background information. And I think it's important that we discuss cases that happened around the world so we don't just think that I know a lot of the cases that I talk about are in the United States or Canada or close by, but these kind of cases happen all over. And with the case of Bruce Diggle, it's just really, really bizarre. Now, like I said, this took place on the island of Cyprus, which is not that big. It's south of Turkey and west of Syria. Now, it only extends, if you were to walk from one end to the other, it's only about 141 miles. Cyprus is most famous for the Limassol Carnival, which draws thousands of people. And this is important, I'm going to explain why. And they are also famous for their wreck diving. Apparently it has some of the best in the world. And their culture is among the oldest in the Mediterranean. The reason I bring some of this stuff up is because with all that going on, thousands of people with the carnival and the wreck diving, people going missing is extremely rare. Bruce Diggle, back on July 19th of 2020, was in this district called Sortira in the Limassol district of Cyprus, which is in the southwestern part. Bruce was hiking that day with a group of 9 people. It was apparently a beautiful day. They were having a good time. But for some reason, at around 5:25 p.m., Bruce said that he was feeling a little uncomfortable. Now, Bruce was 82 years old. He was roughly 5'7" with a medium build, but he was described as being frail. He did wear glasses, and at the time of his disappearance, he was just wearing denim shorts and a blue t-shirt with boating shoes. And he did have his hiking poles, but other than that, he didn't really have much gear with him. He told the rest of the group that he had literally walked less than half of a mile along this road that crossed the tarmac road. I'm going to have maps throughout so you'll see this. But he decided that he was unable to complete the walk, so he headed back towards the direction where they had planned to rendezvous, where they had their cars parked, which was only about 0.4 miles away. The reason I'm showing you some of these other maps is this is an area map of all the forested areas. So as you can see, the island doesn't have as much forested areas as other places that we have looked at. And there's also a UK military base on the island, as well as some different sovereign places. This is a view of looking downtown Limassol, and this is sort of a view of what the basic natural countryside looks like. The reason I'm showing and explaining all this to you is because in this type of area, it's much less likely to get lost. It's very open. There's not as many forested areas. That said, Bruce was a British national, and he was not familiar with the countryside as people that may have been living there. So I can't imagine not only being lost, but being lost in a foreign country. For the most part, they were hiking on paved or gravel or dirt roads. As stated, the only explanation Bruce gave was that he didn't feel like he could complete the hike, and this was not even a half mile into the hike. And around 5:25 p.m., he walked off, and he was, apparently according to them, he was walking in the right direction to get back to the rendezvous spot, and he had his hiking poles, and that was the last time anyone saw him. When the rest of the group got back and they didn't see Bruce and they looked around a little bit, they knew that there was probably a serious problem. They were worried about him because they stated, quote, he looked very frail that day. So they immediately contacted the authorities, and this was a massive search for this island. There is an enormous amount of support on this island. The MMAD, which is the equivalent of the Cyprus Emergency Rescue Management Team, they came in. Then they had this other team, which is the Cyprus Emergency Response Team, but it is a separate team. Then they had another group come in called the ETEA, which is the Emergency Rescue Unit, and they had volunteers and people that work there full time. They had people from the Civil Defense Team, the British base police, as well as the British military base that is on Cyprus. They sent 20 volunteers to help search for Bruce. One of the military commanders was quoted in saying, "It's only a matter of time before we find him." Because of his age and because of what the others reported saying, they figured that he probably just went a short distance and sat down to rest. They even had various helicopters, they had drone teams come in. This was a very highly involved search. Between air and ground, they searched all the road area between the villages of Kanto and Sortira, which is where this hike was going, in between those two villages. Obviously not the whole way, that would be over 100 miles. However, these teams between all of them searched high and low, and they even went up into the northern parts thinking maybe he got lost and got misdirected and somehow went the wrong way and went north. But through all this, they were absolutely surprised and dismayed that they still hadn't found him after 5 days of intensive searching. Unfortunately, after another few days of searching, so roughly 7 days, they had to call off the search, and that was it. There was no other information, nothing came about. Obviously, there were still volunteers here and there that were out looking, but nothing was heard of until November of that year, November of 2020. Sunday, November 1st, 2020, shortly after 10 a.m., hunters found the remains of a man in a very inaccessible area in the Limassol district, under this bridge called the Episcopi Motorway Bridge. And it looked like he had been there for a long time, so they obviously called in search and rescue. And like I said, it was very inaccessible. You can see there's all this rubbish and debris under there. They had no idea how this person got up there. Of course, they took him by ambulance, and then by helicopter they were able to get him to the medical examiner's office. Because the remains had been out there for so long, it was basically just a skeletal remain. They were able to, through DNA testing, to prove that it was British national Bruce Diggle. And unfortunately, that's never the outcome you want to have. But then they started trying to hypothesize, how did he get up there? Because when hunters found him, he was in a sitting up position. So it appeared that he maybe had gone under there to get shade from the sun, but how did he climb through all that rubbish and debris? This was an 82-year-old man who the rest of the group said looked very frail, and he couldn't even finish even half a mile of the hike on the pavement. So they just couldn't put this together. They couldn't understand how he even got down that far in the Limassol district and under that bridge. The investigators, of course, they spoke to everybody that had been on the hike that day. They questioned everybody that had known Bruce or that talked to him. Nobody had any answers except for that he just thought he couldn't handle the hike that day. He walked off with his hiking poles, and that was the last anyone ever saw him. The medical examiner's office obviously did an extensive report and research. They did all these tests, including tox screen, but because of how long the remains had been out in the elements, they just couldn't come up with any answers. So it was thought that he possibly may have succumbed to heat stroke or maybe died of natural causes, but they weren't able to put any of these facts together because of the state of the remains. The other big question in many people's minds was, why was Bruce's remains not discovered after this huge search? And despite the remains being close to the road that he was last seen walking on, he obviously was found under this bridge that we discussed, but why did it take almost 6 months to find him? And why was he discovered by hunters and not by the authorities? I mean, obviously these things happen, but this is still an unsolved mystery because they don't understand how he went from being unable to even hike a flat grade to climbing up to get to this point under this bridge where he was found in a seated position. So it's just one of those things where unfortunately he decided to leave his group of 9, and after that no one knows what happened. And how tragic. You go on a vacation and you're planning on doing something fun and relaxing, and you end up getting lost and losing your life. One of the reasons I brought up all the background info on Cyprus in the beginning is because, like I said, this is very rare. He was the first person to go missing in years. This is just something that is not common on the island. Apparently the island is very safe, people are very friendly, it's a fun place to go and vacation. But I guess the lesson here is that no matter what, if you're hiking with a group and you're feeling uncomfortable, you should always stay with the group. I don't know if we'll ever really find out what happened to Mr. Bruce Diggle, and I'm sorry that it did happen, but Hopefully his family has had some closure, that they were able to give him a proper burial. My thoughts and prayers go out to Bruce, his family, his friends, all the people that helped look for him, the hunters that eventually found him. My thoughts and prayers go out to all of you. Thank you all for watching. As always, I really appreciate all your support. Special thank you to co.ag for providing the background music, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me to the end. I just wanted to let everyone know I'm getting back to my regular upload schedule, at least 3 videos a week, especially once I get out west, which should be sometime next week, and I've got a lot of videos that I'm going to be covering on site, so I hope you all follow along with me, and I've got a couple of new things that I'm going to show you as well. And I also, as most of you know, I will be covering some cases on my drive out there, so I hope you all follow along, and I just wanted to say thank you again for all your support and for watching. I hope you all have a great day. See you next time.